In 2013, the world was shocked to hear that Buddhist monks in Myanmar were inciting violence, mob violence, and killing the minority Muslim population. And this shocked the world because traditionally we think of Buddhists as non-violent, the non-violent religion, and the West particularly has kind of held up that religion as maybe a hope for religions in some ways. And it is embedded in that religion to be peaceful. And here was violence with another religious institution, and we start to see this thread in all religious institutions. What is this relationship between religion and violence? Why do they seem to go hand in hand?
Well, first and foremost, as far as the true meaning of the word religion is concerned, it is the opposite to violence. So when you put the two together, if there is any instance where the two are together, I would question whether it's true religion. And, you know, we just have to go, if you go to the etymology of the word, you understand that there is no violence in it. Religion is an experience. It's a relationship with God. It's a relationship with what you consider is divinity or a greater power. And it's also the interrelationships of all of human beings and nature. And we need to understand that there's no room for violence in that. If there is, then there is a disruption, an imposition, and that doesn't mean, that doesn't equal relationship.
But there is definitely a correlation in history between of people killing in the name of God, or killing using religion as the banner. The atheist Richard Dawkins says that, and I'll quote him here, "Only religious faith is a strong enough force to motivate such utter madness in otherwise decent people." What do you say to that? Because my understanding is that we need to be more, we need to look deeper, because there is certain kinds of militant fundamentalism in something that doesn't call itself religion, that is also capable of a kind of dogma and rigidity of belief system that echoes that of religious fundamentalism. Is there actually a common denominator we're not seeing, and we're kind of lumping it all on religion?
Rebecca, as you know from reading some of my books, if you have, that is, I don't conform to the the general way of looking at life, in the sense that I'm ruled by history or ruled by what we call is normal. I like to look at life from a truly philosophical point of view. That means that, for example, if I was to answer your question without bringing in Mr. Dawkins or any other person's quotes or otherwise opinions, if 1,000 people decide to commit murder and then many more take it up, does that make murdering normal? And so if we have a situation where there's been militancy associated with religious activity, that doesn't make militancy part of religion, and it just makes it militant, it makes it violent, it makes it war, makes it aggressive, but it doesn't make it that it's part of religion. So the question needs to be, is militancy part of religion? And if the answer is no, then those who have been militant cannot be said they are truly religious. It's very, very simple. Otherwise we will just keep going around in circles and not get to the bottom of the answer that is true. Look, religion is about love, it's about beauty, it's about harmony, it's about getting on, it's definitely about brotherhood, it's definitely about community and everybody coexisting and having a respect for each other. And if we don't have that, then we don't have religion. It's very simple.
I mean, you're taking us to the fullness of the answer right there. But there's steps along the way that the questions still come up. You know, like, why do some religious groups appear to have more of a propensity for violence than others? You know, like there's all this separation that starts to happen when we go into comparison between the religions. And in the West, what we've seen is a secularization of life. We've said, let's just separate politics and religion or as much as possible, and that has seemed to have been a management strategy for what otherwise can happen if people are using religion to be impassioned about something that is actually not in line with the essence of religion, as you say. But secularization in the West has been a way of managing that. But has that truly addressed the bastardization of religion, or the way that religion is ill-used, or is it just a sense of tolerance, a situation of tolerance? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, but we've got to come back to the question and the type of inquiry that you're pursuing, and that is, you're still grabbed by what is incorrect. If there is violence, it can't be religious. And so you can't just say that the answer is in secularizing society, because you've got to come back to the fact that religion does not have violence in it. If you think religion has violence in it, then you're grabbed by the wrong. And you can't grab a wrong and make it a right or make it a truth. And you can't even make it a supposition to consider, simply because there is no violence in religion. If a religious group is violent in any way, shape or form, they can't truly call themselves a religious group. We need to understand that religion doesn't have that. Religion is about rebonding, coming together, harmony, all the things that I said earlier in our discussions today. We need to get that right before we go into all these terms that describe this or that and give excuse or tolerance or respect or a portion to trying to find out or understand what is going on in the world.
It's kind of as ridiculous as saying that, is relationship always related to violence? You're taking two words. You've seen a lot of violence in relationships, but that doesn't mean you say relationships are inherently violent.
Now you're following the right track. It's a bit like getting married and saying that leads to domestic violence, because there are some that have, beat up their partner. So it's like religion, militancy, relationship, violence. It doesn't work, because there's a lot of relationships that are very loving, as are a lot of religious people who are completely the opposite of violence.
Absolutely. So what we really need to ask then is, what is it that we can, have we thrown the baby out with the bathwater in terms of understanding religion in modern life, and what could it look like in religion in the true sense? What would it look like?
Look, first and foremost, we need to have a situation where everybody should be free to express how they feel or consider life to be it religious or non-religious, secular, etc. So long as the way of life does not interfere or impose with others, immorally, ethically, violently, unlawfully, etc., then let the living way of each person determine the truth of that living way. There's no need to go and obliterate those that you consider don't deserve their right to live, which is what some groups have done it under the name of religion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in effect, if I hold true the way of the livingness, if another holds true Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever it may be, then so be it. Let's coexist and let our living way determine what is going to be true. For example, if there are shortfalls in our religion or my religious way or in your religious way, eventually they will stand out by way of comparison if we are coexisting and living. And therefore I would adopt the principles that are higher or more sustaining by coexisting with you, and therefore incorporating them into mine, and therefore uplifting both of us together, as you will probably adopt my living ways or our living ways if your living ways was falling short and you could see that I'm more sustainable in a certain aspect of life. And eventually we end up with a one world religion. In other words, we end up with a way of being that we all can see is truly working, simply because we can see it in each other. But to hold firm my belief and essentially wipe out another belief is the way it has been up until now, and it hasn't worked, and that's not true religion in any way, shape or form.
Is it supremacy?
Yes, it is. It's a form of supremacy to believe that your way is what deserves primacy in this world of ours.
And so that's, where we can really start to name it in the true sense, because what you described there is absolutely beautiful. Because why wouldn't groups, no matter what they label themselves as, no matter what they identify themselves as, be open to one another? So fundamentally, there can be a transference, an understanding, an enrichment of each other through an openness that doesn't protect your patch, doesn't protect your belief system, your way as being the only way. But that's the thing we've got to call out, isn't it?
Yeah, the problem is that there are definite shortfalls in certain beliefs, and they don't like to be exposed. So they don't like the coexisting and the true level of respect they should be affording other people, just in case their shortfalls are exposed by a living way that can actually sustain what your beliefs cannot. And that's where supremacy comes in. It's like saying, my way is the only way, and I don't want to be reflected by anybody else that I have shortfalls, and therefore I will put you down, defame, or even wipe you out before you get a chance to show me that my way is not the way.
When you look at it in those terms, you see how that kind of behaviour translates to all kind of ill behaviour in society. So, for instance, we can draw parallels now between scientism today and the dogged fundamentalist rule that the church had hundreds of years ago, in terms of this is how it is. If you're not agreeing, that's heresy and you're put to death. Like science today says we have the answers. If it's not evidence-based, it doesn't have a place in modern thought. There's a real closeness and a real doggedness that's there. And in some ways you can see that energetically is the same outplay. And that's religion and science being both bastardized by that supremacist energy. Would you agree with that? Can you speak to that?
I agree. And look, the subject matter of evidence-based science is probably best left for another interview, and we can go to town on that and expose it. But what I will say on that basis is it's basically based on the ownership of the meaning of the word evidence. And if you can own the meaning of the word evidence, then you are controlling the conversation. But it's very, very easy to dissolve and expose the fact that your meaning of the word evidence isn't the only meaning of the word evidence. Anecdotal evidence is just as powerful as any other form of evidence. You can't say to someone what you're saying is not true because 300 other people, blinded and otherwise randomized, didn't get the same result. The result for that person is the truth, and therefore by their standard, by their truth, it is for them pure evidence and absolute evidence. But aside from that, the new face of supremacy is definitely this evidence-based so-called group of science, which are acting in no different way as some of the militancies that you're referring to earlier in our discussion. But getting back to the question of religion and society and what should be acceptable and what should be happening in society in the global world today, and that is, we have to learn to coexist, and we need to go forward with the way in which humanity is lifted equally. And if we learn to coexist, we can learn to do that. Now, there's a great example. Nationalities and cultures and customs have been able to cross-pollinate. In other words, we today eat Chinese food. We love it. We love our Thai food. We love Lebanese, we love Japanese food, and they love our Western culture. So there's an example of cross-pollination in the sense of coexisting and adopting ways in which we can learn from each other. So we've learned some very healthy ways of cooking and diet from other cultures as they have learned from us. It's the same thing with our way of being, which we could say is what religion is. So if they have a certain way of living that is truly successful, then let's adopt it, and let's not refrain it simply because they are a different culture. Let's adopt it and let's use it worldwide so that it can uplift everybody. And that's what it's about. So all the religions can make a claim. Let us all live together, and let us all live together, be allowed to live together. And what is true in the end is what's going to be the truth, not obliterate and cut out, and take the shortcut by saying, hey, our way is it, without giving the livingness a chance to prove itself.
That's beautiful, because it's a one humanity approach to us working it all out together, working out what actually works.
The one unified truth. I've been teaching it since 1999. Allow the one unified truth to basically show its own face. And it won't let us down.
So basically, we need to look at what gets in the way of that, though, because there's not the standard of decency amongst people that allows for that proliferation of ideas as richly as it could be. Like we seem to forget all the rules when it comes to our taste buds. So food is a great connector across cultures. But when it's about belief or custom, there's something else that comes in, and there's that protectiveness, that doggedness, and that supremacy. How is it that we can kind of start from the ground up and cultivate a decency that means that this kind of unfoldment is possible?
So we have a weakness in our character as a human being that we haven't evolved from yet, and that's pride. And we don't like being shown that we are wrong, that our way is wrong, and that it has flaws. And so we are quick to adopt the customs on a culinary level, but not necessarily on a behavioural level. And so we like to say, oh wow, your cooking is better than mine, I'll adopt that. But not, your behaviour is much more loving and much more harmonious. And therefore I need to swallow my pride and adopt that behaviour and change it. So it's like on the palate level, we're open and willing, but on a behavioural level, on a conscious and prideful level, we're not willing to give that up just yet.
You could say that in modern life there's a certain jadedness with religion that people have started to feel. Not only is there a movement against any kind of religion, but there's also the jadedness within the religious community, with church numbers being down and not a great uptake anymore. But people still intrinsically want something out of the community that religion can deliver. It's not currently delivering it. And you can see, the instances of institutionalised pedophilia being exposed in ways that have never been before, and all that kind of abuse that's being uncovered is naturally going to jade even the most truly religious person. You've got people that go to church and they're loving people that want community, but then they see this, and it's just heart-wrenching. It's traumatizing what's actually going on. What does religion need to do now in modern times to actually deliver what the word truly means to people?
Yeah, look, if I may borrow the word crime, we could say that, and I say this with enormous respect for victims of crime, but it is a crime that we are turned off by religion as a result of those who are acting unlawfully under a religious guise. And that in itself is the crime. There are many being turned off by religion because they see the behaviours being done under under the auspices of being religious or under a certain religion, and they've all done this and that. And people have been, as we say, been turned away. And the numbers, I believe, in attendance to church and so forth are down. But that in itself is not right. That is not the wise way of dealing with something that is wrong. We need to go to the true meaning of what religion means. And if that's not been lived, then say that's not religion. That is, and therefore I will live it this way. But not be turned off religion simply because somebody is living in a certain way that you associate is religion, when in fact it is not religion. We need to go to the truth of the meaning of the word, and if we understand the true meaning of the word, and somebody says, hey, I'm religious and I do this, and you go, well, actually that's not what religion truly is, then we don't get turned off by it. We just say, that's what you decide to do, and you can call it religion or religious, but it's actually not. And that means that leaves you free and actually truthful in the sense of knowing where you stand with that word, and not simply be turned off on a great general basis simply because there's been this horrific situation as we see worldwide with pedophilia.
And that actually empowers every person that calls themselves religion inside their own religion, doesn't it? Because if they say, no, well, actually that's not religion, even if it's coming from the upper echelons, and they might take a stand and say, that's crime, that's not religion, then there's the opportunity for change through that holding what the truth of religion is.
There's another factor here, and the human being at its core is a beautiful, amazing being. You've heard me describe it, that we are truly love, we are truly essence, we're spunk, we're sexiness. You know my ranting on that, and I mean it. I don't hold that back. I live it. I treat everybody in that way. And so for every misdemeanor under a secular guise or under a religious guise, for every one of those, there will be thousands of people who are truly religious and truly secular, in the sense of decency and respect in the way we should be living in community. So we can't let one or a group or a few or even a few million turn us away from the true meaning of what we know life to be. We can't just keep switching off to everything simply because we find a bad apple in every patch. It's like saying I will never have an apple again because somebody in Belgium bit an apple and was poisoned by it. Now that's one bad apple, sure, but not every apple in the world is going to be that way. And we need to take that approach. I know it's oversimplified, but it's actually having its effect. It's a bit like 10 apples in Belgium, 10 apples in Holland, Netherlands, 10 apples in Canada. Suddenly we can't have apples in Australia. It doesn't make sense in the consumables, and therefore we should understand that it doesn't make sense in human life.
But it's more than 10 bad apples. In the cases of what we're seeing with the Royal Commission into institutionalised child abuse, it seems like it's embedded in the culture of the church in this country, in other countries, but also in institutions generally, whether they're religious or not. What do we see when we see that level of evil? How do we deal with it?
We see a society that is living under tensions that are not true. We're seeing a society that is based on the lack of understanding of human beings. We see that there is a tension our life brings to us that makes us, warp, lose ourselves, and do what we're doing. We're seeing a complete setup that is not making sense to who we truly are. Therefore, the bigger picture is not to, the approach, I should say, is not to pick on the wrongs, but understand what is true and right, and then bring that back to the society and analyze where we can lift the game. That's where the answers are. It's not in taking cover from everything that is wrong, because in the end, where are we going to take cover in? Do we go back to caves? Plato clearly told us it doesn't work in caves either. So we need to understand that a one unified, cohesive way. Letting itself work itself out is the way forward, and we need to be patient, and it will work.
So we've got the extremes that we see and the evil that we see, but you're saying that we have to take it back to how we live each day, because those extremes, there's a critical mass of us that can make a difference by the way that we live, that is going to pull those extremes back from the extremities that they are. You've talked about that in other interviews. Can you expand on that a bit?
That's correct, Rebecca, and you've made it very easy for me, in the sense that we need to go back to a living way and allow that to demonstrate its way and its truth. Wherever there is a shortfall, we will know it by our own living way. There's no need to cut down anybody, there's no need to attack, there is no need to do anything. Just allow people to live, so long as they're not, as I said before, unlawful, imposing, unethical, immoral, etc. And so let the living way show itself, and that will determine what it is true for, what will be true for humanity and what will not be true for humanity. It's actually very, very simple. It's only when we interfere that we delay the end result. In other words, if I cut you down, all I'm doing is increasing the capacity for me to live my way, because essentially I've obliterated you, I've annihilated you from the face of the earth, and what am I left with? I'm left with my way. But if my way is not right, if my way has shortfalls,
which it obviously has, because you just obliterated me, so
exactly,
you can't be a content human being.
then I will never know that my ways are actually going to turn around and start affecting me. But I'll be too prideful to see that. I need the reflection, and so we need, as much as possible, a cohesive decency that allows everybody to live their way, and that's how we get there.
It's almost like we have to embrace the reflections that we get. So if there is a reaction, if there is that propensity to want to obliterate, then there's obviously something that we have to look at. It's like tracing it back to the moment that you react. And this can be done in everyday life, in the smallest things, because we're reflections for each other in everything. It's not just big picture, groups against groups or anything like that. It can be a brother and a sister, it can be a father and a mother. The way that we reflect things to each other, to look at things, we all recognise that moment of defence, that moment of reaction, and that's the moment of choice. Is that what you're talking about in a living way, that it's in those details?
I'm talking about parenting our children and educating ourselves to understand that we live in a world where reflection is optimum. We are evolving through the science of reflection, and we need to understand how that works. So for example, if you and I are work colleagues and we see each other every single day, and we were both, let's say, 30 kilos overweight, and suddenly in the next 3 or 4 months you drop the 30 kilos or you drop 20 kilos and you start looking much healthier, much more the shape that you are designed to be. Not necessarily that you are thin, but the shape that obviously looks and feels much more comfortable to you. I have a choice in that situation. I can get jealous, I can react, I can get angry, furious, frustrated, go into rage or whatever, that you've been able to do what I can't. Or I can simply say, hey Rebecca, how did you do it? I've been trying to do this for many years. How did you do it? Now it may not work for me, but the openness allows me to see that there is a different way to the way in which I have been living. And that's how we are. So that's how it works. It's a very simple example. Many have already done it, so this is not new, but we need to adopt it on a much more global and open level.
To take the example a bit further, you might say it's weird what you're having for lunch. Like there might be different ways of attacking it out of it, or making something wrong about what the person's doing that's actually healthy for them, as a means to not look at the behaviours that you're in. And you see that play out all the time. Part
of the openness is in educating the openness that we need, is simply if you've lost those 20 kilos or the 30 kilos, and I see that you're having only cucumber for lunch, whereas I might be still having my most treasured hamburger or hot chips or with gravy or whatever it is, then because I've been educated to understand reflection, I can look at that and say, right, then I have to accept my 30 kilos extra because I indulge and love my chips and I love my hamburger or whatever it is, and I'm not at the capacity to be able to just eat cucumber for lunch. The key is to not resent that you can have cucumber and I can have chips, or that why should I put on weight just simply because I love my chips. It's not about ruminating by comparison. It's simply just by understanding through reflection and through openness that we can coexist and learn from each other. And if I walk away learning that I'm not ready to lose weight and I'm not really interested to lose weight simply because I don't want to give up the way in which I like to eat, then so be it. I still walk away much wiser. But to cut each other down and to have a comparison that is antagonistic and in opposition, adversarial, then that doesn't work. And it hasn't worked.
So to take that simple example again, you mentioned the jealousy can come up, and there's this moment where you're furious at what you might be seeing that's being reflected to you, and in that fury you're blinded to what is actually being offered by it. And humans have a propensity to do this, to go into the fury and the jealousy before making the change. Why is this such a problem for people?
Well, first and foremost, it comes back to the lack of parenting and education of the, we're not taught to be reflective. We're not taught to understand reflection and the science of reflection and the beauty that we can get from coexisting with people and understanding that we can learn much from others as we can from ourselves. On the subject of jealousy, I've described that as the fury of you seeing that others are making a choice that you haven't been able to make. And that's the end about jealousy. That's all that it is. But it's hampering. It's an impairment to evolution to have jealousy, because it stops you from moving forward, because simply you make the object that is reflecting to you the decisions that you're not able to make or don't want to make into a target, into a rage upon you exerting that rage onto them.
So if we understood reflection, if we were educated about reflection more, then we'd see something that maybe we didn't have, and there wouldn't also be the self-judgment, because self-judgment is such a crippler as well. Because if we go into the self-judgment, then if we saw something different than us and we weren't in self-judgment, we'd just go, oh, maybe, there'd just be that natural curiosity. Maybe I could try that. But as soon as we implode back and start abusing ourselves, that kind of is thwarted by a whole lot of self-criticism, and that's a part of it too, isn't it?
I like the questioning here, because I know that you're representing what a lot of people will be asking on this topic, but it takes us back to the same situation as if you look at somebody doing something that is immoral and they happen to be religious, it doesn't mean that is religion. And so we have to divorce the fact that immorality is not what true religion is. It's in the same way here. If we have not learned to be reflective, if we have not learned the science of reflection, we're going to have all the flaws. So those flaws don't need to be put into the equation if we don't know what the behavior truly is, if we were adopting the science of reflection. In other words, if we were educated to understand the science of reflection, we would understand that others are there to reflect to us a possible different way. They're not there in our faces trying to show us that we're wrong or trying to put us down. It just changes the whole perspective of how we see people. And so if you're there doing something, I will be educated to understand that is purely a reflection, that you are coexisting with me, and that I can observe you and see if that living way that I notice is different to mine is actually truly successful or not. And if I have that settlement with me based on the education that I have, that I can observe you and see that you're doing very well, I will be more inclined to adopt it, or at least try it for myself, rather than see that you're putting me down, or that you're trying to prove me wrong. So we take the adversarial aspect of two people away when we have this coexistence, where we use the science of reflection to show us that there is a possible way.
So the science of reflection then is actually an antidote to the competition, the pitting against each other that we have in human society and that we actually champion. You know, the dog-eat-dog world, the survival of the fittest. That's all anti-evolutionary when you look at it in terms of the science of reflection.
Better than that, the science of reflection gives us the ability to heal, if not arrest once and for all, a disease that affects humanity, and it destroys families, and that is the issue of comparison. And it stops us comparing and not having anywhere to go with what we see. With the science of reflection, you're able to be far more open to the possibilities that there is a different way, as I said before. And it's very, very simple. You are open, you have a coexisting attitude with another person, and when you see something that you like, you can adopt, you can observe, you can see, and if you see something you don't like, you don't put it down, you simply say, that's not for me. It's very, very simple, very beautiful, and it can work.
And if you have that in family, then you have that in society, then you have that between religions, the secular. That's how it grows out.
One life, it's the one unified truth.
Yeah. Beautiful.